Sorry, Chris. I did. Yeah, there you go. Sorry, guys. I just wanted to let you know I was going to record the meeting, or the presentation. So there you are.
Look at that bottle room. Holy.
I know. I was wondering. I was wondering who's got all those bottles.
Hey guys, we're both really happy to be here. So looking forward to hanging out tonight. Thanks for having us. Cheers.
So when we decided to talk pastry stouts tonight, we didn't know it would be like the hottest day in the year. So nothing beats the heat like a big 11% stout with a bunch of crazy ingredients in it. So yeah, so we're just going to talk about pastry stouts. It's a style that we love to make. Even home brewing was always one of my favorites to make. They could be very challenging, but also very rewarding. And they're for us, at least in the business, it's kind of like our wow beers. Those are the ones that bring a bunch of people out of the woodwork to seek us out, and they sell out pretty quickly. So they're fun beers, they're exciting ones. So yeah, we'll just kind of get into it. So I'll keep it sort of homebrew focused because that's probably what you guys are looking for. So when we talk about pastry stouts, we're talking about like very high ABV, very thick stouts that normally have like dessert-like flavors. So coffee, chocolate, cinnamon, coconut, things like that. Some places use fruit. Personally, we're not big fans of fruit and stouts, but you could definitely have them in there. And the big thing from a brewing perspective that makes these kind of eye-popping is really high starting and finishing gravity. So typical pastry stout or one of our imperial stouts will start at the 1130 to 1140 range. Normally shooting for like 1136 is kind of the standard. And we'll finish at about 1060 to 1066, somewhere in that neighborhood. So yeah, you're basically finishing gravity is what our IPAs would start at. So the challenge is to balance everything. So you're going to have big roast, tons of malt, a lot of residual sugar, and a lot of adjuncts. So to make those drinkable and enjoyable is the challenge. So that's where the fun comes in. So I always felt that it was a balance between the sweetness, the roast, and the bitterness. So those three things got to all come together to make something with like a 1065 finishing gravity drinkable. So so mashing, typically we would mash pretty high. So everything is to drive that big body. So all the choices I would make for in terms of mash, grain bill, and process lead you down the path to how am I going to get the biggest body I can. So there's really two ways that are, I guess the three ways to get that big of gravity would be lots of DME, lots of extract, and that's never a route that I've enjoyed because I find that we'll just thin it out or dry it out, or it gets, that kind of defeats the purpose. You get the ABV, but you won't necessarily get that big body. You could do, and we've done both at Third Moon, you could do a long boil, or what we've started to do recently is like a double mash or a reiterated mash. So long boil is you fill your mash tun, get a full kettle of wort and just boil it for say 8 hours, 6 to 8 hours, something. Drive it down by roughly half in volume. The thing with that is it's a long day, and also you could risk scorching it, so it could get pretty acrid by the end of it. So what we've started to do now is double mashing. So when I say double mashing, I mean we will fill the mash tun as full as we could get, run off the wort into the kettle, clean the mash tun. Now we're going to move that wort back into the mash tun as strike water and grain in again with the exact same volume of grains and run that off. And we can normally get a full kettle. We get to start about 1,400 liters at 10 or 11:30 starting gravity doing that method. So it's a long day and it's an expensive way to do it, but we've really liked the results since we switched to this method. Yeah, so the other thing is building body. So when you think about how you're going to get big body in a beer, oats, calcium chloride, mash pH, mash temperature, any way you could think, we have to use that, because unless you got everything at it, you're not going to get that big of a big body without that super saccharine sweetness. And I find that the high mash pH really helps to avoid really acrid bite you get from a lot of roasted malts. So we'll normally in the 12 to 15% roasted malts, which is pretty high, but I like a very dark, really jet black beer. So that could get pretty ashy and pretty nasty. So we're normally mash pH around 5.7 to start. So mashing in at say 158 at 5.7, and is you got to get pretty thin because you want to max out your mash tun. So then we'll run it off, get in the kettle, we'll aim for about 30 IBUs, boil it for as long as you have to get that high starting gravity, and then ferment it clean. So I like to use Cal Ale, US-05. I have used Kvike in the past. That's really good on a homebrew scale because you can turn it out quickly. You don't have to be too worried about temperature control. Something where you're going to get it neutral, clean. You don't want any esters. You don't want any harsh alcohols. So you want to get a big, clean base as you can, and then you're going to start playing around with adjuncts. So adjuncts, that's where the beers really shine, and that's what really the fun happens. So I've always been a proponent of large volume with low contact time. And that's even the same for our IPAs. We use a lot of dry hops for a short time. So if we're going to do cinnamon in a beer, some recipes you'll read will say, do 1 cinnamon stick for 2 weeks or 2 cinnamon sticks. But I would use, let's say, 12 or 15 for a day or a day and a half. Same with cocoa nibs or cacao nibs. Use like a full pound for a day and get them off that quickly. So I find that large volume of adjunct for a short time, you get a lot of the flavor without any of that, anything you don't want. So cacao nibs, you start to get that astringency. With let's say cinnamon, you can get a woody bite. Coffee, it starts to go really acrid and you start pulling out acidity. So I'm a big fan of heavy volume of adjunct for a short time. And the only caveat to that would be vanilla beans. So vanilla beans, you want to chop them up, grind them up as fine as you can to get a lot of contact time. And those you could leave on there for a month or 2. It doesn't really matter. So then recommendation would be to keg it just so you could dial in that carbonation. If you're bottling, I would probably throw some fresh yeast at it just because that's a really big beer with an aggressive fermentation, and drink them fresh. So as much as you think a beer that big could be aged, and they can be aged because it is a high ABV beer, the adjuncts will start to fade. So they won't necessarily go bad, but it won't be as bright and vibrant. And that balance you try and strike with different adjuncts will quickly fall out of whack. So coconut can be as short as a couple weeks. You'll start to notice that the brightness of the coconut is going to start to fade. Coffee is a little bit slower, but you will lose some of those top notes. So yeah, so that's kind of that's the Cole's Notes version of the big stouts we like to brew. Chris, did you want to jump in with any kind of big stout theories or philosophies?
We noticed, over the past 5 years since we've been planning this, that, some of the things you would expect in the market globally are not exactly what you see. You kind of think stouts for colder weather, but we've been seeing that just the same as probably most of you on the call. It doesn't really matter what time of year. When we want a nice big stout, we want a nice big stout, and we're looking, in North America down at the tip of Florida, and we're thinking, why are some of the best stouts being made in North America being made in some of the hottest places? And we just really finally realized that it's a niche market, and there are people like us who love to drink big stouts all the time. And the US kind of really, had a strong influence on us by showing us how there's something to be said for making a beer completely, to the utmost in precision and some of the European styles. But there's also something to be said for having a little fun with the recipe and trying some new things and exploring and seeing what you can do and turning some theories upside down. And so we love these, pastry stouts because they allow us to explore. And if you think about how you'd be so judged to do different, types of lagers because there's a predetermined thought about what it should be. With pastry stouts, because it's such a young style, it really opens the door for a lot of different breweries to try a lot of fun things. And when you're using ingredients that you believe in, like our big vanilla beers, we love using real Madagascar vanilla beans when we can get them. Super expensive, but really, like any beer, it's no different with adjunct stouts. Putting in the best ingredients gives you a much better chance at having, something delicious come out of it. So we're having fun, we're learning, and I'm really interested to hear what kind of stouts you guys like, because sometimes people are, I don't know if there's a split view on the call between people, but some people say, oh, that's it, I don't want any adjuncts in my stouts. And there's something to be said for that, and we certainly have some plans for stouts like that. But it's also fun to try different flavor combinations and see what comes out of it.
I don't know if we wanted to do some Q&A or anyone had any questions or kind of ideas we could bounce off, but yeah, we're happy to answer any stout questions.
Yeah, let's throw it out there. Oh, there we go. Let's throw it out there. Anybody on the call have any questions or curiosities for Bebo and Chris?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
actually, it's funny. You guys are sort of talking about a category I'm personally not that crazy about. I'm more of a dry stout guy, especially when you brought up the hot weather. But you were talking about extracting from your roasted grains. I was trying to, while we're on the call, find one murky article talking about steam poisoning techniques when I've tried to do, the blacks to black beers. Is that something? I don't even know how you do that on a commercial scale, but it was basically cold steeping, cold extraction to get the flavor and the color out of the grain without getting all the bitterness out. Is that something you guys have played with or given thought to?
Yeah, I've done it on the homebrew scale, and I didn't love the results, and I found that I think that it would take a lot more dialing in. It was definitely not a 1-to-1 for doing cold steep. So the idea with cold steeping grain is you would make a stout like a white stout. You would do everything except the dark grains. You would mash normally without the dark grains, and you would cold steep the dark grains or the roasted grains. So you could do that, and you could do it like a cold brew coffee. You'd leave it overnight or for a day or something like that. So I found after I did that and filtered it out, I just used like some coffee filters. The color impact was much less than I thought. So where I would normally use, let's say, like 1.5 pounds of roasted malts, I used 3, and still it was more like a brown ale than a stout. So the one way that I combat that, like I was mentioning, is the high mash pH. So I find that the high mash, a lot of those, the dark or the astringency or the unpleasantness you get from the roasted malts, in my opinion, is from that significant impact on pH from adding that much roast. Now, you're not going to really get any sugar extraction out of that. Some places will add them right at the end of the mash. Some do that cold steeping. But the way I do it to combat that is aim for 5.6 to 5.7 on the mash pH, and let's say 4.6 on a final pH. I find that high pH balances that acridness.
I guess how high would be
Interesting.
high?
I've found I've had some.
Oh, sorry. Just curious,
Yeah,
how high is
go.
high? Like 5.6, 5.8?
pH.
Yeah, for mash pH, you said.
Yeah,
higher
like
mash-
5.7 is kind of the target. Like anything over 5.6, I'm happy with, but 5.7 would be the target. And on the final pH of the finished beers, 4.6 is kind of the target. So we'll
And I guess-
buffer it up if we get too low.
I guess your water in Milton's probably somewhat similar to ours in Toronto.
Yeah, it's the same water, exactly.
Do you have to add any baking soda or anything to get up that high, or it's just you just add less acid?
No acid, yeah, baking soda or yeah, but any of those buffering agents that you could use. I like to do a blend because I find too much baking soda you can get a little bit of the saltiness from it. So I was using that Kalkwasser before. I didn't mind that, but I found just kind of a blend of everything to get the mash that high. The pH that high is what I've settled on.
Cool. Thanks.
Bebo, on the topic of water, do you target a certain concentration of calcium, chloride, and sulfate in all your stouts, or what do you do with that part of it?
Yeah, I'm only adding calcium chloride. So I find the gypsum just will kind of bring out that dryness, and it kind of accents that sort of more acrid astringency, whereas the calcium chloride rounds it out. So the problem with that is obviously that will drive the pH down. So I'll go a little heavier on that, like maybe in the 100 range, and then everything else is just buffering to get that pH up.
I have an adjunct question too, if nobody else has one right away.
Yeah.
I've been wanting to use nuts in a stout, and I can't remember at Third Moon, but I know in your homebrew days you did a really good like 14% stout with almonds, I think, and a few other adjuncts too. But I was just wondering, like, what's your process for preparation and addition of different nuts?
Yeah, so like anything, you want to get the highest quality you can, and start with. So I'm just gonna turn the light on. I noticed I'm pretty dark. Go with you get the freshest you can, obviously unsalted, just get raw, high quality. And it's about contact, like surface area. So bust them up, roast them fresh, and get them into the beer as freshly roasted as you can. And like I was saying before, high volume with a low amount of time. So I wouldn't leave them on there for more than a couple days, tasting as you go. Obviously bag them so you don't get so it's easy to get the beer off of there.
How does the oil affect the natural oils affect the beer?
So a lot of these beers have fairly poor head retention because of when you start throwing a bunch of different adjuncts in there, you will get some oil extraction. So we've done a coconut beer that the head on it was like not great because there was so much oil from the coconut. So it's something that it's personal preference. It's never something I've minded too much. Some folks really don't like it. So you could build that up with, throw some chit malt or some higher protein malts in there. You could use an extract. That's a possibility. Or I know some people can will use like paper towels or something to try and get some of the oils off of it. But I find the oil is where the flavor's at. So to get too much of the oil off of there is kind of defeating the purpose. So yeah, so you just kind of live with it like a
Obviously, it's your shelf life because it's not going to. It will affect the stability of the beer, I assume, longer.
yeah. Yeah, these are definitely beers you want to get too fresh.
And these are beers that you know what you're getting into. Like these types of adjuncts, like cinnamon kills the head, coconut kills the head. Coffee often does not help the head. It's like you know what you're getting, and you're after the flavor, and so you realize it's a consequence of using certain ingredients.
So out of curiosity, because we're looking at flavors here, have you guys ever I'm just going to pull something out of my head here. Say a Nanaimo bar. Okay, so Nanaimo bars have got I think a fairly unique flavor, right? So is it just about aiming for the flavors that you would see, or sorry, not see, taste in the Nanaimo bar, and picking those out and then dropping those flavor adjuncts into the stout?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's different ways to approach it. That would be kind of the baseline. So we did like an Oreo cookie stout. So what we did was we used chocolate and vanilla to kind of mimic those flavors you get from an Oreo cookie. And then we added like actual Oreo cookies to the, in conditioning. So we didn't get too much flavor impact from that, but a lot of it is just like, very light top notes you're going after. So just as like a philosophical approach, yeah, if I was we've not done a Nanaimo bar stout, but if I was going to, I would take I think it's chocolate, and there's like a custard in there, so probably some vanilla, some coconut, and then I probably would throw some Nanaimo bars in there.
Thanks. I think that'd be, I don't know. I think this sort of the pastry stouts just kind of can lead you all over the place, right? And I guess I'm just trying to imagine, I've had a lot of really good dessert pastries, and you think about those ones that you had that hold your memory, and then you wonder, how am I going to get that into a beer, right? I think of things like my aunt's cheesecake, which was always way too runny to be cheesecake, but it tasted so good, right? And just trying to get that and impart that type of flavor into the stout, it's just to do that, I think it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's something I love and I find really like rewarding about brewing these kind of beers. Or when let's say like a traditionally brewed stout with no adjuncts, you'll get notes of chocolate and notes of vanilla, and notes of maybe some fruit from the esters. But like I love the unsubtle approach of like, we're just gonna add that in there. So like going back to the Nanaimo example, you can mimic these flavors and you could do certain things to do it, but like it's just so much fun to me, the idea of just actually throwing them in there. Like, and at the end of the day, it should be fun. So for our first anniversary, we did an imperial stout it was going to be like a birthday cake for our anniversary. So I literally got a sheet cake that I went to the grocery store, and it was like right in the last lockdown. It was not too long after that started. And I called and I said, how big of a sheet cake do you get? And she's like, well, how many people? I'm like, what's the biggest one? And she's like, it feeds 100 people, but you're not going to have 100 people, are you? I'm like, no, it's obviously not. So, and she was like really concerned about the amount of people that I was going to feed. And I'm like, it's just, we're going to put it into a beer. And then she was even more confused and concerned. And so when I went there, she was like, it was a very awkward experience. So anyway, it was nice. So it was like for our anniversary. So we had the stout boiling and cut up the cake, and everybody had a little piece, and we just started throwing slices in the boil. And it was, I don't know what flavor impact we got off of that, but it was just like, it was very fun, and it reminded us like why we're doing this. Just like, not nuance of this. There's a whole sheet cake in that beer.
So
And-
out of curiosity, sorry to cut you there, Chris. I mean, but out of curiosity, when you do something like that, because you're throwing in a bunch of stuff that I would well, maybe you don't, right? But I would assume you'd want to kind of filter out after the fact, right? So how do you guys handle that?
It just it made it through. It clogged our heat exchanger, and it was a total nightmare to clean. And there was like a sheen of oil on our kettle for a day. But that's what makes it fun, I guess. And I also recognize that to a lot of people, this sounds like sacrilegious and completely ridiculous and really gimmicky. But I think for the folks that like it, they recognize the fun aspect of it.
I was going to ask, because you started your original presentation also about how driving up your ABV and all the rest. I mean, there are a lot of dessert, let's call it flavors or desserts or things that we recognize that don't pair with alcohol, and you could potentially flavor a stout with some of these things, but at some point the heat of the alcohol would be upsetting to that flavor salty. Like, do you think that anything in this kind of style needs to be driven to a very high alcohol level? Would some of them be better off as a 5% ABV to let that flavor play through a little less interrupted?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that, like, let's say 3 or 4 years ago when these styles started booming, it seemed like the sky's the limit. But as this kind of matures more, it seems like there are certain flavors that are relied on really heavily. Some chocolate, vanilla, coconut, cinnamon, maple, walnuts, almonds. Those are kind of right in the wheelhouse. Some people throw cherries in there too. And there's a lot of kind of balancing within that, and maybe adding an ingredient here or there. Like, around Christmas time, you'll see like the orange stouts with like, orange and chocolate. But to your point, yeah, they don't all need to be this obscenely high. We made a porter with toasted marshmallow. We had a whole bunch of toasted marshmallows in, and that was like more medium bodied, and I think it was about 7%. And I found that to be a good approach, where it was hints of marshmallow instead of like you're chewing on an entire marshmallow. So balance and everything is a good thing.
Out of curiosity, how are you guys pulling out those types of flavors? Like, for example, marshmallow. Like, other than adding actual marshmallows into the beer, right? Because marshmallow is sort of one of those flavors that's kind of like, well, it tastes like marshmallow, right? And I mean, I'm thinking about other non-standard flavors, right? So, like, those flavors are very unique, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it's difficult, and that's something that we struggle with, especially the marshmallow. Like, we've done a handful of beers with marshmallows. We recently did like a fruited sour with marshmallows, and we used dehydrated mini marshmallows, kind of the same ones you would get in like Lucky Charms. And they gave a very distinct sweet marshmallow, but it's not really what you think of, because you're probably imagining like sitting around a campfire with the toasted marshmallow. So so for that marshmallow porter, I literally went to Walmart and bought all the marshmallows they had, and then we toasted them for hours and hours and hours and hours, and threw them all in the secondary. So, and yeah, that's how we did it. So,
I mean, also for the s'more stout, it's like we made that stout even roastier, because you want the nuances too. And it's the same thing with, I was going to say earlier that different styles of beer, you don't necessarily need to have the exact thing happening. You just need to have the everything needs to feel right. And so with a campfire, you need a bit of smoke in the air and a bit of roastiness. We didn't want to put smoke into it, so it's like a real roasty stout, and that helps to create the scene. It's just like a pumpkin ale. You want to create the spices that create the scene. And person who was saying earlier about their grandma's pie, and it has its own thing to it, and you can start to think about, well, I like my spicing this way and that way, but sometimes it's like I just don't want it to be too spicy because I don't like that. So there's nuances, and there are things that, you know, we personally like, Bebo and I, and that's what we do with our beers. But there's no one right way to do it. But you just got to be true to yourself and kind of create something that you feel is sentimental for what you've experienced.
Have you tried adding a bit of bug spray?
Bug spray?
You know, for the
Yeah,
For the s'mores,
exactly.
campfire.
Burned arm hairs.
If you guys can make a stout that also acts as a mosquito repellent, that would be fantastic.
I think if you drink like 5 or 6 of those, you won't care about the mosquitoes.
Oh, that's a good one.
But this-
Hey, Bebo and Chris, it's John here from Georgetown. Cheers. Good to see you guys. So I think probably the biggest stout I've made so far, homebrew, has maybe been around 7.5%, 8%. So, you know, to go beyond that, like, would you say just, you know, fuck it, go for it, like try to hit 12, or would you kind of say, you know, practice the approach of kind of creeping up 1% at a time to, you know, to kind of keep that balance?
I find you learn more by going to the extreme and backing it off. Like, just philosophically, I don't know what you would learn by going from 7 to 8%, but if you went 7 to 14, you would learn a hell of a lot. It probably wouldn't be the best beer that first time, but you know, these are challenging beers to make, and you know, you need a huge pitch count. You need, you know, physically a lot of grain. They could be really slow sparges. So just my personal approach is I would just push it to the limit, and then you would learn a lot more that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And to be honest, I actually have a ton of grain right now, so this might be a good way to get through it.
Yeah, that could settle the once or twice a year bulk buy conundrum.
And Bebo's always, you know, said to me, the best way to figure this stuff out is to just brew, just do it. And so a lot of what we're doing, which is fun, we get to go on this journey together because we've only, you know, been here for like a year and a half. Well, some of you have tasted Bebo's homebrew for years before then, but you basically just do it. You say, how do I think I can get this flavor? And you just do it. And it's scary doing it on the batch size that we're now at. But, you know, how did Bebo get here? Just one batch at a time on the homebrew scale, and just over and over again. And the methodical approach is the one that usually is going to get you the best results in the long haul. And sometimes we have to make decisions on the fly, and it's very stressful, but you know, you do your best, and then take what you learn from there and put it into the next brew, and hopefully very quickly you can get in the realm of what's acceptable to the people drinking it.
Yeah, and I think another point about this is for people judging your beers, or for the reaction of folks who would drink it. If you give someone an IPA and say it has like Mosaic and Galaxy and Amarillo in it, no one's going to be like commenting and giving you feedback about the amount of Amarillo compared to Galaxy or whatever. Some people might, but the vast majority of people won't. But if you say this one has graham crackers and marshmallows in it, everyone's going to know exactly what those flavors are and look for them and judge the beer based on those flavors. So that's kind of an interesting thing about this, is that because they're so unsubtle and almost unrefined in a way, that it's a lot easier for people to judge. So it's just kind of an interesting thing about them. Like, I would never expect that from, you know, if you give someone a Hefeweizen, like, oh, it's the bar, there's not enough wheat in this. This is only, what, 40% wheat? Like, no one would ever say that, but they will let you know if it's not chocolatey enough or not enough, whatever.
We had a question come through the chat, Bebo and Chris, from Shane Joseph asking about a recommendation for good base malt for a pastry stout.
Yeah, I think these are the kind of beers you don't hold back. So I would go with the richest. Well, I like Maris Otter. We use kind of English malts wherever we can. So I'm a big fan of faucet malts. So we use those kind of across the board as we can. I do think that you don't necessarily need to, because in a beer that big with that much going on, with that much adjuncts, if you just went with 2 row, you probably wouldn't notice it. But I wouldn't go something with like Pilsner, let's say. You're trying to build body at every step of the way, build richness at every step of the way.
Thanks. I know that we Bear had mentioned Golden Promise.
Yeah, great choice too.
Yeah, there you go, Bear. Nick, I see your hand up. You got a question? Go for it.
Hey guys, just curious, maybe you covered this and I missed it. What do you do for oxygen?
A large amount of oxygen. So we actually had like a DO meter in the brewery, and we were getting like 25 parts of oxygen, which is pretty high, but that's what we've been going with. And you just want to get as healthy a fermentation as you can. So a lot of oxygen. I assume you're going to get a blow off that's going to completely ruin everything that you own. And pitch a ton of really healthy yeast and keep it on the cool end of the recommended temperature.
And would you oxygenate, say maybe 12 hours after pitching originally, or you just do it the once?
I've never done that, and I think that's an interesting approach. I still think you would get vigorous enough fermentation going that you wouldn't risk oxidizing. I know people here are probably smarter than me about this stuff, that around that time is where that second growth phase could start, or when the lag is over and the growth phase is really kicking off. I just found like a simpler approach to me is a bigger pitch, more oxygen up front. And that's worked for me, but I know that is an approach people do, but personally I've never done it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Since you guys are talking about ending up really big because you're starting really big, out of curiosity, how does the yeast play into that? Because I know that you can have a lot of the English ale yeast that might end up a lot higher at final gravity than say, I know you mentioned it earlier, but say for example, you're not going to use like a yeast that's going to dry out the beer, for example.
Yeah, so we use like US-05 Cal Ale, and that's a good balance of clean, not too attenuative, but won't crap out too high. I used to use like exclusively the Fuller's yeast in 1968, which I really love, but those bigger beers, they could crap out. So I remember I had one die at like 1080, and that was just like undrinkable. That's just ridiculous. So Kvike is another popular option. You could use that. Well, I would use like Voss and kind of know that it'll still be a little Kvike before you start adding some extra ingredients into it. But yeah, the English strains or anything kind of on the low end, you're sort of playing with fire. Low end of attenuation, I mean.
I can't imagine. I have difficulty brewing a beer that'll start at 1080, let alone a beer that finishes at 1080. And wow.
That's not good.
Have you guys ever had to going back? I know, Chris, you mentioned this, but when you're starting to brew stuff at your scale, right? Like, I mean, for us here on the call, we're talking like, okay, it's X number of hours of brewing and 20 liters, and if it's lousy, well, it'll probably go down the drain or something like that, right? In your experience, because I want to say making this up as you go along. I don't mean to say it like that. I mean to say it like you're experimenting, right? So you're working towards something. Have you ever run into an issue where it's like, oh my God, this is not going to be good, right? And not that you'd have to dump the batch, but you mentioned you had to adjust. was there a situation where you had to adjust and you were able to pull back? And then was there a situation where you had to adjust and you couldn't pull back?
Yeah, we have had one where it was actually a sparging issue where when we do those double mashes, especially when the roasted grains are mashed a little too fine, it gets super powdery. So on the second mash, it was like it just took forever, and eventually I just called it, and we just dumped it. It was like hours and hours in, and we had like 50 liters to show for it. So that sucked. But in terms of beers finishing out too high or too low, thankfully we've been pretty lucky with that. But yeah, well, I wouldn't. It would suck, but we wouldn't hesitate to. I mean, you couldn't have a 1080 beer that we're gonna package and sell. So I think if something like that, I know some people use those like amylo enzymes. I know you could use those, but that would be a little risky because I know you can kind of infect your brew house with those. So not personally use that, but I think I would be more comfortable just dumping and learning from it and trying again next time.
Understood. Eric, you had a question.
I did. So I had maybe two opposite ends of similar questions. So I guess the first question for both of you would be, what was a flavor adjunct combination that you did that you were pleasantly surprised worked better than you expected? You might have a different answer, so that's why I'm asking both of you.
We made a pumpkin stout. Or it was a pumpkin latte. Pumpkin latte? Yeah, well, it was a coffee stout with like pumpkin spices in it. And I wasn't expecting to like it, but I actually did. That would be mine.
Oh, I don't know about not expecting it to taste good, but I'm actually drinking right now our anniversary vanilla barrel aged bestowed. And man, you take a bunch of Madagascar vanilla beans and you blend them up. For me, it was Bebo blended these up in the same blender that I use to make so many smoothies in the morning. And when you actually take the time to do things the long way, sometimes it comes out, and the volume that we used in that beer was so much, but the rich velvety carpet that is laid out when I drink this beer, I'm just like, I'm so glad that this was the bean we used, this was the method, and we've done a lot of things with different methods, and you're trying to extract as much as you can, but it's trial and error a lot of the times, but definitely the way we did this one, I was really happy, and I'm glad that Bebo and I both allowed ourselves to take 12 bottles home each that we continue to sip on. There have to be some perks when there's that much scrutiny on the line, right?
For sure. I guess the other part of my question, it would be, what would be a flavor combination that didn't work out as well as you'd hoped, and what did you learn from it? You talked about like this is trial and error, and you try something and you have to learn from it for next time. So what was one that like you learned something that you thought would be that we could also learn from, because you did it, we didn't?
That's a good question.
And if you don't want to share it for brand purposes, that's totally cool.
I mean, I was thinking about, I don't know if this is exactly the right example, so if you have a better one, Bebo, but I was thinking about the Epic, not a pastry stout, but whatever, same difference. You take a base beer and you throw a bunch of flavors at it. Remember we did the dragon fruit one and the star fruit one, and you have these ideas in your head about like how things will work, and then you get a bunch of fruit puree and it shows up on your doorstep thousands of dollars later, and you put it in the beer, and all of a sudden you learn, oh, this is this is definitely clogging the canning line, and we just got a few cases of beer that are unusable, and the whole canning line that showed up today is completely clogged, and it's game over. and and oh right, nobody really knows how to do this yet, so no one had any good advice for us to prevent this from happening. And we had to resort to all sorts of filtration methods in the week that followed after that canning line. The canning day was a bust, and we had to use mesh bags and brute force and filter a whole bunch of fruit pulp out of things. So you start with what you think is going to work. And one of the things that I found I love about this community is just the same as we're doing tonight with you guys. People are more comfortable with sharing secrets. It doesn't matter. It's like whatever brewing equipment you have, everyone can have the same idea and brew it, and it comes out slightly differently. So it is a true art, brewing. And so we can say these things and help each other not hopefully waste a bunch of money. But until you get in there and you put the rubber gloves on, it's really just anything can happen. But that's part of the fun, right? Like you're cooking. It's the same thing when you're making food. You're sharing with the people that you think are going to appreciate it, and everyone can really enjoy the creation, and each one can be unique.
And you said starfruit and dragon fruit was the one that clogged the canning line. Was that issue specifically to those fruits, or you just had a higher concentration of solids in that batch?
So normally we get the puree, and it's like very puree to the point where there's like no inconsistency or any particulate. But that star fruit we opened the jug, and there was like whole star fruits kind of bobbing along. So we thought we got most of it out of there, but the canning line, it did not stand a chance.
Oh, okay. I missed that from the first part of the story. Wow.
And I guess to your original question about a flavor that didn't work, I thought, and this may be not totally what you're asking, but we've done a couple beers with like chilies in it, like chili peppers, and I'm not a fan of like really spicy stouts with chilies. I just like where you get the flavor of the chili. So we've used like adobo and chilies like that are really low on the heat. It's almost like something you'd use to like make a sauce with, and a lot more flavor, like rich earthiness. So I was really happy with how it turned out. But kind of I was saying before, like the marketing aspect of it, you say it's with chilies, people expect it to be like face ripping hot, no matter how much you try to explain it to them. So that was something that is a learning experience, that when you set a certain expectation, you're going to get judged against that.
I like your preference though. Yeah, low heat.
Yeah, true enough. That's so true. I mean, you get you mentioned chilies, and people immediately think it's going to be super hot, and it's going to be like way too spicy, and they don't recognize that there's different levels, right? So, Rain, you had a question. I see your hand up. So, you still on there, Rain? Hello, Rain. I think Rain might be jammed. We did have a question from Craig in the chat asking, what is a third moon? So there you go.
It's a brewery in Milton, Ontario. Thank you. I can see all the muted people laughing. So the idea with third moon is that there's like 12 moons in a year. So each month has its own full moon. And when there's like 2 full moons in a month, the second one is called a blue moon. But like normally it'll go by seasons. So each season, like in the summer, there'll be 3 full moons. And occasionally when there's 4, the third one is called the blue moon. So it's kind of the disruptive way that the celestial bodies have chosen to laugh at our calendars we make.
Nice. Okay. Follow-up question. Due to your proximity to the Maplehurst Correctional, we all know Strange Brew and the Max van Sydow as the Brewmeister. Any collaboration for an Elsinore?
Yeah, we're like halfway between the courthouse and the jailhouse. And there's a police
Wow.
station right along the way. So
That is amazing.
we
There's
could
a
I
do
love
something.
that.
There's a
Good
tunnel, isn't
question.
there? We know.
Yes, we do not use garbage bags as fermenters.
Where should we go? Looney Bin or brewery?
I don't know if everybody on the
It's a
call is
jelly.
aware of that. It's a second city, like the Bob and Doug McKenzie movie Strange Brew. If you guys haven't ever seen it, please look it up. Take a look at it. It's a lot of fun. Some classic stuff. Sorry, Mark, you had a question. I know Rain, I think you're back too, right? So
Yeah, I think it seems to be less broken up. I had a question about, well, how do you know when you've jumped the shark? I mean, I'm thinking about like, well, one particular brewery that was highly respectable called Rogue that decided to do that maple bacon donut thing. And everybody just walked away from them on everything they ever did after that. Like, can you go too far and just no longer be taken seriously?
Yeah, I guess you could. I don't know.
Was that all garbled?
I think they really jumped the shark when they made the beer with the yeast from the guy's beard. But
Yeah.
That was the nail in the coffin. But I mean, I get the
we know
experience
this
and the
is,
fun. You could lose people, right? Sorry.
the bottom line, this is a fickle market. We know it. It's like we're at the end of the day, for Bebo and I to be able to come in the morning and look at each other and say, are we still digging this? We've got to be true to ourselves. And there's no other style like a pastry stout that really allows the creativity for you to put your own interpretation, your own view, your own sentimental memories into it. And we have a list of ideas that we have and things that we think are fun and that we want to do, but it's why for us, I feel it's a style that allows for more unique beers to be made, where you can get to the point where you can say, did I enjoy that, and enjoy the subjective part of it, which is really what this is all about. Like, trying to judge every pastry stout onto some ideal is kind of silly. Like, the whole point of it is like, there's different beers to make the world go around. Enjoy each one of them for what they have. So I find that it's fun part to complement the IPAs, where we have a much more narrow view of what we like and what we think makes a delicious, drinkable IPA. Same thing with a pastry stout. For me personally, I don't want it to be cloying. Like, pastry stout implies it's dessert, and we're throwing all these sugary treats at a beer, and it's very easy for it to become too sweet. And that's the whole magic and the art to me, is trying to get it to a point where it's delicious, but it doesn't feel like I'm about to get diabetes.
thanks, Chris. Mark, are you ready to go with your question?
Yeah, just back to the brew day of these beers. Bebo, you mentioned you get them about 30 IBUs. I was just wondering, with like an 8-hour or so boil, are you just giving it like a neutral bittering addition, like one addition at an hour or something? Or what do you do for the hopping?
yeah, exactly. Like Warrior, Magnum, something like that. Hour to go before the end. Just throw it in the calculator.
Okay, thanks.
Cliff and then Ian.
So I don't know if I can actually say that I've had a pastry stout, and looking on the other screen, I don't see any online. When can we, I don't know if we're spilling the beans, it's not Thursday at noon yet. When might we see another kind of release in that vein?
We did one last week. It was a s'mores stout. That's the one that Chris was talking about before. We don't have any more in the fermenter, but I think we're brewing another one this week. So probably within the next 6 weeks or so. I would say.
Okay, cool. I've signed up for your list, so hopefully I'll catch it then. But yeah,
Thank you.
I'll drop by and see you before then for sure.
Awesome, thank you.
Ian?
Sure. First of all, I would think sitting around a campfire, I would take pastry stout over the actual s'more anytime. I think that's the way I'd go. But I just have a question about coconut, because every time I've ever, I've done coconut beers or had other people's coconut beers, usually everybody toasts the coconut. But then I've had a beer from my wife's head office is in St. Louis, and there's a brewery there called Perennial, and they make a beer that she's brought me back a couple of times called Fantastic Voyage. And I don't know for sure, but by like reading kind of the description, it sounds like they use just straight coconut, no toasting. And I'm just wondering if you guys have ever done, because I've tried it. I don't know if I didn't have enough of the non-toasted coconut, but I'm just wondering if you guys have ever done non-toasted coconut and any success with that. Because I think it gives it a different coconut flavor, but maybe that's just me.
Yeah, that's a great question. So that is something we do. So we do a blend of toasted and untoasted coconut. I find that the toasted gives a nice toasted coconut flavor, but the oil from the raw coconut is really what drives that aroma. When you smell it and you get that like big bright coconut, that's where that's coming from. So I find a blend, we normally do like 2-to-1 of raw to toasted. And then another two tips I would give for coconut is the finest you could get. So you'll get those like chips or sometimes shredded. Go for like the fine macaroon. It's almost like a powder, because it's all about contact, surface contact. And then the last tip would be use a lot more than anyone is telling you to use. Like just people say like they use a pound or whatever. I would say like 5 pounds minimum in a 20-liter batch would probably be a starting point. You might want to even go higher than that.
And a third tip would be exposure time. Like leave it in there as long as you can.
Yeah, that's one of those. I keep saying like short contact time, but coconut's one of those that you'll be okay with a longer time. But just keep tasting it.
Is it a case of, out of curiosity, and not to interrupt you, Ian, but is it a case of that those lighter flavors? And I say lighter because coconut is sort of like, to me, is sort of a lighter flavor. I'm going to use, I wouldn't compare it to, but I'm going to use lychee as another flavor that's kind of light. Is it a case of you just got to have as much as possible in order to have that flavor come through in these types of beers?
That's exactly it. Yeah, just like it gets washed out very quickly by a lot of other flavors. So you just need a substantial amount to stand up against the beer. So to that point, we just did one of our slushy sours with coconut in it, and that got about a quarter of the volume of coconut that we would use in a stout, and it came through beautifully in the beer. So just because there's a lot more going on in these big beers, that's why you need so much.
Do you do anything to the coconut to prepare it? Like I find that if I've heard like do vodka, soak it in there and then drop it in. But then I find sometimes I get a little bit, in those high alcohol beers, sometimes I can taste that alcohol from that vodka because I can't strain it out without losing too much coconut flavor. I was just wondering if you guys dump it in or.
Yeah, we just throw it in there. Bag it, obviously, or else it's gonna be a nightmare to get out. But yeah, just throw it in there. There's always an infection risk doing that, but if you get good fresh ingredients that are handled well, you don't got to worry about it too much. Or you could even lightly toast it, just for a little bit of heat to make you feel a little bit better about it. But I just chuck it right in there.
All right, awesome, thank you.
Welcome.
Eric, your turn.
Yay. Okay, so earlier you mentioned second mash, and it got stuck there. So was that like a fancy like reiterated mash where you like are doing two mashes with the same wort but new grain in order to get higher gravity, or is that just like a second brew to fill the fermenter because you have twice the size fermenters of your brew house?
That was the first one, the reiterated mash. So to get these like the really high starting gravity, we'll mash once, fill the kettle with wort, clean the mash tun, and then move that wort back into the mash tun to use as strike water. So like our strike water is like 1080 starting gravity. Dough in again the second time, the same, obviously fresh grains with the exact same grain bill. Dough in the second time, and then as we're running that second one off, then it's going to be, hitting the kettle around 11:20 to 11:30, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Okay, yeah, genius. That's a smart way to do it. Probably expensive though.
It's
Twice as much
expensive, but well, the long boil, we would boil off roughly half of the wort. So like you either get, it's just like math, like this much sugar and this much liquid.
Mhm.
It's just how you're going to extract that much. So those long boils, we would boil it for like, 8 hour. One time we mashed in at like 7:45 in the morning, and 10 p.m. we were knocking out. So that was like a brutally long day. And then at the end of the day, like the fermenter's like barely half full. So
Mm.
that's when we switched to the reiterated mash. And we were doing them, and like the beers were selling out really quickly, and we had a lot of angry folks. So we're trying to make more beers. So this is the way we're doing it. But as I was saying, with like the roasted malts, they could be a little powdery. So on the second sparge, sparging the second time on the reiterated mash, it gets very, very slow. So we would end up using like a full bag of rice hulls, like a full 25-pound bag of rice hulls in like one mash, just to try and speed it up.
And so I guess you sparge really slow. Does that mean that the efficiency isn't quite like what kind of drop off in efficiency do you see between the first mash and the second mash? Like I've always like the first time I heard about this was John Bookman on some podcast somewhere was saying that he gets the same efficiency on both mashes, which seemed crazy to me, counterintuitive. I would have thought the second mash would have less.
Yeah, we get less. So the first one will fill the kettle at roughly like 1080, and then using the exact same process, the second one will fill it at, let's say, like 11:30. So definite drop off.
And do you have any strategy? Like you mentioned, like the second one has rice hulls, but other than
They
that,
all have rice hulls. The second one just has an insane amount, like more than we use in a month for all of our other beers.
wow. So, but like
Yeah.
other than adding an insane amount of rice hulls, do you have any other strategies for how you handle this reiterated mash? Like, do you put like more of, like if you have like a certain amount of grain you want to mash across both mashes, do you like change the ratios between the two mashes for some reason? Like more roasted in the second one, or more roasted in the first one, or something?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's something I went back and forth and talking to other folks about. My original intention was to do only base malt in the first mash, and then all the specialty malt in the second one. But I chose to just do the exact same 2 times each time. So I don't know what the consequences are of doing it the way that I do versus any other way. And the other trick is that I aim for any water and pH adjustments on the first mash, and the second mash just leave it as is. So it will be a little bit lower, but then since we're buffering, knocking out of the kettle, we have targets and also like final pH targets. We'll buffer as needed. So we just adjust once, not twice.
That's really cool because I like every time I've tried to do imperial stouts, I always end up having to mash like a crazy amount of grain just to get like half that volume in beer. So the reiterated mash, something somewhat new. I mean, not new, but some new to me ish. And I definitely want to try it. Thanks.
Yeah, and then you get, especially with the bigger the beer, your efficiency would drop. Like it's not abnormal to get like 50 or 60% efficiency on some of these big beers. So it's annoying doing all of that, and then you fill the kettle and you take the measurement and you're like, oh, 1060, what the hell's going on here? So I find the reiterated mash is a good way to counteract that.
Anyone else have a question? Sorry.
I was just going to say, I have a comment about reiterative mashes. I actually heard a podcast recently where they were talking about it. Might have been one of those craft beer and brewing podcasts. And I think that they said that between the long boil versus reiterative mash, they just get better quality, like shelf life and stuff out of the beers from the reiterative mash than the long boil. Something about, so I don't know why they just said that for them. And they just got better quality wort overall by doing the reiterative mash than the really long 5-6 hour boil. So just something I heard. I don't know any of the science behind it, but
Yeah, I would say our experience it matches that Chris and I were both really happy with just the pre-adjunct stouts since we've switched to the reiterated mash. It's hard to tell on such like a dark big beer, but you know, it's got to get beaten up a little bit by being boiled for that long. And there's like, there's got to be some scorching going on in there. So we're just overall much happier with it. And I know like some other breweries that have switched to doing this. It seems like across the board, everyone's happier. It's just more, it's a long day and it's tough, but it's a more consistent end result. And, you know, the actual beer just seems a little richer.
A long day, obviously, Bebo, you're, and maybe I missed it, but my assumption is that you're doing the first mash and then you're proceeding on to the second mash, right? In other words, you know, you're not, because I've considered a reiterative mash, but more so from the aspect of, oh, I can, you know, mash one day and save, you know, save the wort and just use it the next day, sort of thing, right? But I
Yeah,
know
we do it all one day.
Yeah,
I'd be worried about start to sour if you left it overnight. Like I don't know how you would.
Yeah.
I don't know what you'd have to do to prevent that.
Good point.
Yeah,
good
just
point.
start early in the morning and know you're gonna go late at night.
Has there ever been a I say a white whale for you guys when it comes to like pastry stouts? Something that you've kind of longed and wanted to brew or chased after and just haven't gotten quite right?
Well, more just by time's sake. We want to do some barrel aged stouts where we're like aged a year in a bourbon barrel, then another that same beer taken out of that barrel and put into a different barrel. Some like multi-year, multi-barrel treatment. So we just haven't been able to do that yet, just because we haven't been in existence long enough. So that's some, you know, something that we're planning to do, but haven't yet done. Maybe Chris could talk about some of the commercial beers we've tried to get but haven't.
Well, I know, you know, one of Bebo's favorite beers and maybe favorite non-barrel beer is still Unapoo's Imperial Stout.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those beers where, you know, it has the combinations you're looking for. You know, it's got enough flavor. It's not overdone. It's not too sweet. It's giving you the adjuncts and layering them out. I find the magic in an adjunct stout is that you can taste the different adjuncts individually within the same mouthful, which, you know, I don't know if I'm articulating right, but it's that is very difficult to do. You don't want it to become a muddled mess. You know, like you can paint all these different colors on a canvas and they can all become shit brown in a sense. So it's like, you know, the magic is trying to have each of those adjuncts really show up and for you to be able to taste them individually and recognize that they're there while also appreciating their coexistence in the same arena. And certainly Hunapoo's is an inspiration to, I'm sure, every brewer that's out there in this style.
Nice. I had something else that came up while you were talking there, Chris. I was thinking, how did your first pastry stouts go over because you guys are in Milton, right? How did it go over in the community? And by that I mean the local community that you guys are in, because I know that sometimes it's tough. Different breweries open up in different areas for different reasons, and eventually they build a following and a community around them, right? But sometimes the local community might think, oh, this is not my style, or this isn't me, like how did the first pastry stouts go over there?
You know what? The first ones we did, people drove from miles and miles away. And that's kind of how this game works, right? Like,
yeah,
you open a brewery, ask Jester King, why they opened up where they did. It's like,
yeah,
if you're making something, and I feel this is not just liquid, but it's like, it's food as well. If you're making something with fresh ingredients and people know you put a whole lot of love into it, then they want to get that. And so the local component is certainly a factor in why we situated ourselves in Milton. But really, with these kind of beers, and pastry stouts are the prime example. People will go to great lengths to get them. I mean, you put peanut butter and chocolate in a beer, and people have their list. Like they know their top 10 peanut butter pastry stouts they've had, and so. I remember now Gord from Bellwoods giving me a growler of Willoughby's peanut butter cup porter. We were trading beers. This was more than a decade ago. Neither of us were with the breweries we're with now, and that gent gifted me an entire growler of one of the best peanut butter beers you're ever gonna have, and. I don't know where I was going with all that, but it was good.
I think, like to Chris's point, in our experience, so we put new beers for sale Thursdays at noon, and then we're not open for people to come until now Friday at noon, but it used to be Saturday. So like anytime we've done one of these beers, it's already sold out before the locals like come walking up to buy beer. So we haven't had too many folks who were turned on to it. It's more like we get people from all over like emailing like, can you please send some of these to Alberta, pretty please?
But you know what? The Miltonians that had, is that the right way to say? They who have tasted it have come back. And that's one of the fun things about the community around us that supported us, is when they taste a lot of the beers we put out, sometimes it's new for them and it's the first in that style that they've had. But we've been blessed with a lot of people who say, whenever you put out a beer, I haven't missed one yet, and I'm going to try every single one. And they come back and they say, I wasn't an IPA fan, or I wasn't a stout fan until I tasted yours. And now, now I'm really, my eyes have been opened. So that's one of the fun things definitely about being in a community, is being able to have the support that not every beer you're going to brew happens exactly the way that you thought it would, but it's just fun having everyone out for a meal.
Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, I think I would agree. I think there's the local community, depending on who they are and what they're looking at, and that once they see there's people showing up at the brewery, they might be hesitant at first because it's like, well, I can go wherever. I don't have to go to this new place. But once they see people showing up and they see there's a little bit of a buzz about it, they tend to they're curious, like most people are, right? You're curious about like, well, what's this all about? Let's see what this is at, so, and I'm sure that's happened to a number of breweries in Ontario, but I mean, for you guys, it's been tougher too, because it's been during the pandemic, right? So, it hasn't been the easiest, I'm sure, the past year, or even just as you guys were opening too.
Yeah, we were in like March when the lockdown started starting. We were like 95% of the way done with our build out. And it was a pretty, I mean, it was a horrible time for everybody, but just realizing like, this might not happen. And yeah, that was tough. And then, packaged beer is a low margin, high volume game, and there's not too many packaging breweries that are like in the 10 barrel size that are doing very well. So it was a rough go, but so far so good.
Placed yourselves well, I think, especially based on like, you do have a following, obviously. I mean, there's, I know there's a lot of us in the club that would order and love your beers, right? So
Thank you.
I mean, it's also good because you guys come from a home brewing background too, right? So, does anybody else have any questions?
I just want to clarify the last comment we heard there. So you had to pivot to packaging, low margin, challenge because equipment and cans and everything have been really been hard to get in the last year. And you decided to jam it all up with fruit pulp?
Oh, it's a mobile canner.
Oh, somebody else's problem.
Yeah, so we don't have a canning line. We have like a manual 4-head bottler, but like a counter pressure filler, but we have not been able to afford a canning line yet. So we use some of the mobile canning companies.
The upside to not having a canning line is you don't have to maintain it, as I understand.
Yeah, we just got to pay whenever we do one of our slushy beers, they charge us an extra CIP fee. Which
was
coincidentally
interesting because
came
of
about
us.
just after our we clocked the shit out of that one. Yeah, weird timing.
Yeah, just created for us.
Yeah.
Cliff actually had a question regarding any hints towards a tap room opening at all?
Yeah, we're actively building it. So fourth wave be damned. We have not ever had people in to drink beer there, even though that was obviously the intention when we were building it. So we fought off kegging for a while when it was kind of happening a little bit, towards the end of last year. But because we all knew there was another wave coming. So so we finally we bought a keg washer, we bought a bunch of kegs, draft systems being built. There's still just 4 of us working at the brewery, so we're brewing multiple days a week and packaging every week and doing sales and everything. So building our tap room on top of that has been a challenge, but we're getting there. We're expecting hopefully the next 6 weeks, maybe a good guess. We'll hopefully be able to have people in and do some draft beer and have some fun. But
Nice.
yeah, still up in the air.
There's a GO train to Milton, right?
There is, yeah. And there's also a jail too.
Yes.
So be careful.
I don't think I should drive if I'm going to be having any of these stouts. So I should.
Yes, please don't.
Wow, like I mean, with the with only 4 people working in the brewery, how much is it? This is a stupid question because I know the answer. How much time or how much effort are you guys putting in? Like, I mean, because it's only for you, right? And I know that.
So Chris just this Saturday, his first Saturday off since we opened. I've had one off since we opened. We started alternating Saturdays. Every other Saturday, one of us could take off. So yeah, it's not unique to us. It's a challenge. It's a grind. It's like, 10, 12-hour days every day. Sunday's our only day we're not at the brewery. We're still constantly talking about new ideas and strategy and bookkeeping and sales, and it kind of never ends. So
Have you guys gotten tired of thinking about beer?
not yet.
We need more breaks like that. That is for sure. it's kind of a, you know, whenever you think about it, and we were just in the situation 2 years ago where we were already planning this for almost 5 years and making that jump to give up our day jobs to do it. It's don't let anyone tell you otherwise. You know, starting your own business is the hardest thing you'll ever do, and then it's a conversation that just doesn't end. So Bebo and I were just hanging out outside of work, talking about beer, and while we were working our day jobs, thinking about beer. So we thought it just made sense to, you know, open a brewery. So then we don't have to be talking about beer when we should be working doing our day jobs. But the unfortunate, it's the pendulum swings hard the other way, and then there's no way to turn it off. So you're constant, like it's a constant conversation we're in 24 hours a day, and the only day we're physically usually not in the brewery is Sunday. Though Bebo has to sneak in to check on the beers, but it's messed up. It's a strange existence, but you know, it's good to feel like one person in that we're not, you know, having a job doing something else and constantly thinking about beer. We spend our entire waking existence working on the very thing that we're passionate about. And so for that, it's good, but there's definitely a limit to the balance that you can handle. And 2 years in, we're looking forward to some of the changes that are going to happen rapidly in the next 2 months, where we transform from a business that's been 100% packaged beer by design, thankfully, in these times, and now we're going to open up and be a whole nother side of the business that takes on a life of its own as we open the tap room. And we're looking forward to hanging out and having a beer with all of you, and trying to figure out how we can continue to have, you know, full on production and tap room happening within the same four walls. It's going to be fun.
The best of luck we wish you, and we'll all come and patronize you. I will speak for all homebrewers who are here, because I think everyone's heard this, and you've already heard this because you've been homebrewers yourselves. There's always that person or persons, you know, when you're a homebrewer, that come to you and say, "Why don't you start a brewery?" And you have to say to them, and these are my two things: I like brewing, not at 6 a.m. every morning, and B, I don't like having to run out at 3 o'clock in the morning when the alarm goes off on my building. And that comes from being a small business owner, right? You know, there's, you are slaves the moment you do it. And
that's actually happened.
Yeah, like
exactly. We got an alarm on our phone and we weren't even open yet. And all of a sudden it's like someone is in your building.
And I'm drywall guy or something.
I'm like, was that you? Was that you? No, and I didn't get any response. So I live a little further away than Bebo does from the brewery, and I'm like, well, then I guess I'm going. So there I am, like driving up there, and I'm thinking to myself, well, what am I gonna do when I get there? Like if there's someone, you know, like, you know, with their mouth on the hose and they're just siphoning all the fuel, like what am I gonna do right now? And we gotta. And what am I gonna do if they're like carting it into some truck and, you know? Strangest thing.
My business partner, the alarm company sends out a body, they bring in the police if it's dangerous, and we pay the alarm company. And I keep telling my partner, I keep going, because these things happen, sometimes false alarms, right? But I keep going, why are we paying an alarm company if they can't deal with it? Why am I getting out of bed?
A good point.
Out of curiosity, guys, have you guys, because I don't know, because things are slowly starting to open up, have you guys got licensees? I'm curious. This is just a curiosity question. You don't have to answer it. I mean, if it's
well, we've had a bunch of places like the bottle shop. So since that became a thing in, you know, during the pandemic, we've somewhere around like 50 or so bottle shops. that buy our beer to resell, but for like draft beer, we've only ever filled 3 kegs ever after doing like 147 batches of
Wow.
10 barrels at a time. We filled 3 kegs and sold 2 of them last week. So
Do you expect that to be a potential market? Because obviously, don't get me wrong. I mean, I know among us here on the call, there's obviously a fan base or a bunch of guys and girls who appreciate your beer. I'm sure there's more, obviously, outside of this, and I would expect that as places open up a little bit more, there may be a desire for people to ask, "Hey, how come I don't see Third Moon on tap?"
yeah, it's something that we go back and forth a lot. Like there's people have heard of us and never tried our beer, and that would be a good way for them to get our beer. But financially selling kegs to bars is the worst, the lowest profit per liter by a good chunk. So
There you go.
ideally we fill our tap room first and sell what packaged beer we can after that, and then further down the line is kegs. But we'll obviously be strategic. There's a handful of places we love and we would visit before we own the brewery that we want to get our beer in, but that's not going to be the kind of thing where we're just going to start pumping it out all over the place. We just don't even have the capacity for it, to be honest.
Yeah, that's the other thing too, right? You guys would be brewing 24/7.
I feel like we already are.
Yeah, it's one aspect to think about the brewing of the beer, but it's another aspect to think about, how are you going to move the beer in a timely fashion? And it's think of any small business. You want to find the right balance between supply and demand. And now that we're going to be opening up our tap room, we obviously want to make sure that we have enough beer for the people who come out to visit us, and so that's priority. We want to get beer as far out as we can, but we don't want to do that at the cost of being able to have it available on site. So it's a difficult balance. We're going to take some guesses out of the gate when we open the tap room and dial it in from there, just like brewing pastry stouts. Just trial and error.
I know I for one, and I know there's probably a lot of other folks on the call who are looking forward to the tap room opening, right? And looking forward to getting out there to Milton and sitting down and having a glass, right? I mean, it's been a long time in general, right? Not just for you guys, I'm sure, right? I mean, but for everybody, right? And to be able to do that, whether it's by I can't remember who said it. I think it was, I don't know if it was Rain or not, but by Go Bus, right? Going out by Go Train out to Milton, right? Or whether it's hiring yourself an Uber to get out there, which may be expensive if you're coming from Toronto, but hey, it might be worth it, right? So
what are we doing?
We originally were going to be opened in Burlington near the Appleby Go station, and that was part of our business plan. Opening up, it's like we're close to the the GO train line, and people can come to visit us without having to worry about driving. But every municipality is its own wonderland of challenges to open a small business in. And so if you're thinking about all of this stuff, the beer is one aspect, but there's a lot of other challenges.
Yeah, zoning and bylaws are much more difficult than making beer.
Yeah, the challenges that Bebo and I found ourselves in for the whole first year of getting this thing going, after 5 years of planning, were really not things that either of us were passionate about or had any knowledge of, but you just find yourself thrust into it. And we've been knocking down the challenges one at a time, and we'll keep doing it.
I think the end result is the old quote from Field of Dreams. You know, if you build it, he will come. Right. So
That's good.
right, which is what I think is the case here. Right. I mean, there are other breweries that I could point to that I would say the same thing about, but obviously, you guys have got something special going on because people are looking towards your brewery as you know, for new beers, the styles that you're producing. They know what to go to you guys for. They know what they're going to get. You know, high quality, you know, craft beer, right?
Yeah. I think if to put it like a homebrew perspective, it's the difference between like having some friends over and serving them your beer and you could see them drinking and talk about it and enjoy it and kind of experience it, versus like entering beer in a competition where you just drop it off at Toronto Brewing and, you know, a couple weeks later you find out if people liked it or not. So like the whole existence for Third Moon has been like, you know, we make a beer, we package it, and we're really excited about it, and then people come and buy it, and then they leave, and you don't get that like full feedback loop of what they think about it, and you can't experience it with people and everything. Again, this isn't unique to us. Everyone in the world's basically been going through this for the last year and a half, but to finally have that where we could like sit down with friends or, you know, people who have been supporting us since day one and drink a beer together and talk about it, and you know, what do they like and what do they taste and everything. I think that will like close this loop that has never really been closed for us.
It gives, yeah, I would agree. I think it'll give you guys a little bit more, I want to say fulfillment, not that you need it, but it'll provide that little something that sometimes is missing when it comes to immediate feedback.
Yeah,
for
just
the
make
beer.
it and send it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think this whole GOAT train conversation is thinking too small? I mean, ultimately, you're Milton. You're near an airport. Why don't you support an international audience? You know,
I think
they don't just wait for locals from Toronto to take a GOAT train. Wait for people to fly in.
didn't Brewdog do that? They like chartered an airplane.
They've done everything. Who knows anymore?
Yeah.
We definitely are thinking bigger than Milton. There's, you know, lots of stuff that we've been excited to do just in the first year, like sending a whole batch of beer to Copenhagen, to Mikkeller. That was pretty exciting. So we definitely we have aspirations beyond our global community, but at the same time, the whole, you know, purpose of our name is that we're in harmony with the, you know, the environment we're in, and so we're part of a community that we're really grateful to be part of, that's been supportive to us throughout the pandemic, and we just want to grow this business in a way that's sustainable. And you know, in my past life I would always hear this with your customers, and you want your customers and your vendors to be healthy, because that's healthy business. You don't want to completely, you know, take advantage of one part of that equation, or it's not sustainable. So, you know, we're making beers with the best quality ingredients that we can find, and that comes at a high cost on our side, and we're just trying to find a market price that you know, allows us to keep doing what we want to do, and as long as we have the audience that is supportive of that, we keep going. That's how it works, right? If people continue to support us, we will continue to do these things. If they don't support us, then we'll have to make some tough decisions and pivot in some way. But we're just really thankful, and we know that a bunch of you guys on the call are supporting us, and thank you very much, because it takes all of us to make this work. It's amazing.
I will give you an inspirational comment based on what you just said. And a funny thing, it comes back to airports, but that's not where it started. You know, pre-COVID, in the normal times, I spent a lot of time in Vancouver. And Vancouver's obviously got a blessing of great breweries of many kinds in the whole region, does just as we do. And one of the things that I always get grumpy about is when I have to travel through an airport and there's very little local representation. Places like Portland, Oregon are amazing because you could see everybody's got somehow represented. But in Vancouver Airport, in the one of the terminals or exit terminals or whatever, there's a little wine bar that tends to focus on, local BC wines. Lovely, nice place to stop for a drink before you hop on the plane. And they've always had Four Winds beers there. And Four Winds is a very, very small scale. I mean, they don't have a big reach anywhere, but their beers there, they're nice, they're wonderful, they're true to form, all the rest. And I was in there a year or two ago and enjoying a beer before getting on the plane. And I don't know if the details are correct, but I was talking to the waiter that was serving me, and I said, "It's great that you have these here." And he goes, "I think by volume we sell more of their beer than wine." Now, the wine's probably higher price, probably higher revenue, but he says people just come in here just to get this beer because there's nowhere else in the airport to get anything decent local. So I think take that as an inspiration. Plant your seeds where people are going to care.
It's certainly something on my list that I'd love to see. I mean, Florida, the airport, Cigar City, right there. So after, filling myself with so many ridiculous beers on a beer trip down there, I then, check into the airport and go to the Cigar City bar and have a beer. It would be amazing to be able to make that happen. One thing at a time.
Yes.
Slowly but surely. Are there any more questions? Yeah, sorry, Mark.
I know you guys are quite busy, and you'll probably just get busier once the tap room opens. But have you thought at all about any collaborations or competitions or anything with homebrewers, considering your roots?
Yeah, definitely would love to do something. I don't know what, but yeah, pencil us in for any kind of
Stout competition or something?
Yeah, exactly. I know for me, like when I got a beer in at Cask Days and I brewed it at Granite, that like I forget what competition that was from. That was like a really rewarding experience for me. And the same thing, I got to brew a beer at GLB, and that was like one of the in my brewing journey, that was one of the really hallmark moments for me. So like to be able to pay that back to someone would be a really cool thing.
That was the Cast Days homebrew competition. The only time Volo ever let us judge a competition in their old bar. I think Ralph himself selected you out of the best of show.
Wow.
I wonder if he remembers that. That'd be really cool.
I think Thomas and Julian were also seated at that table.
That's so cool, because I see those guys every week when I deliver our beer to them, and that'd be a fun thing. I'm gonna ask them that next time.
It was in the old Volo. I have a picture of us seated down judging a homebrew competition there. Probably one of the last, not the last time, but one of the last times I was there.
Now you have an excuse to do an anniversary edition.
Last.
Any other questions for? I had one more. I did have one more question. If nobody else has one, so I'll let everybody else go first, because I don't know the answer to this. Everybody else might know the answer to this. Steve, Bebo, like I'm trying to understand it. So like, how did you come to be known as Bebo?
It's not a very interesting story. My real name is Steve. When I was like a baby, all my family called me Stebo, and then it became Bebo, and then it just kind of stuck, even though like no one else in my whole extended family has like this weird nickname, and I hated it my entire life, and everyone in my family called me it, and it just kind of became my name that stuck. So like when my family talks to each other about me, they still call me Bebo. Like everyone in my life calls me Bebo. So yeah, the only time I get called Steve is like when I'm in trouble or when I'm at work. I guess now that I've worked, now I could be Bebo at work. So I guess only when I'm in trouble am I Steve.
I see a question from Komal. Any plans to make a Bach? And I'm gonna second it with Doppelbach.
Yeah, Doppelbach. Hey,
Yeah, I would like to. I homebrewed a Doppelbock that I was really proud of, and I enjoyed quite a bit. I don't know. There's an appetite for the amount of Bach that we would make in a batch, but I always felt like, once we have our tap room open, it'll be easier to experiment more and have like kind of a wider variety of beers on tap that may sell a little faster. When it's in cans and it's packaged beer, you can only be so, as weird as it sounds for kind of crazy beers we make, like if it's not for us, if it's not a big stout, a fruited sour, or like a hazy hoppy beer, that's probably not going to sell too well. So one day we will, I'm sure.
The Ontario marketplace is crying out for more Hellas Buck.
You guys have done a few styles that you're like, other than just what you're known for, like the porter, the pilsner, the pale ales. Any hints at like what's next for like the not hype styles?
No, we did a black IPA that the handful of folks that like that style really like. So we're talking about when the weather gets a little cooler, bringing that back. Now that we have the tap room and we're getting more tanks too, so we expanded with we got a couple more, and then we've got a handful more coming. So as soon as those are online, our chillers are gonna be maxed out, our brewery's gonna be maxed out in terms of like cellar space. So then we'll have a little more flexibility to do some more lagers, and also having the tap room, they'll probably sell a little better than if it was just packaged. So we'll start to expand out as we can, but no immediate plans to stray too far off the beaten path.
nice. Yeah, because you guys have become known for the stuff you're brewing, right? I mean, let's be realistic. I mean, I always like to tell people, I say, oh, you know what, you got to have like that gateway beer for people to walk in and have. And most times that gateway beer is some sort of lager, right? Usually German Pils or Helles or something like that, right? But you guys have been, like you said, you become known for these IPAs, for these pastry stouts and slushy sours, stuff that you can't really get everywhere, right?
Yeah, it's funny. Like in terms of gateway, I find that our slushy beers are as gateway as it comes. So many people are like, I don't like beer, and I love them. People that love beer love them. People that don't traditionally get interested in craft beer and craft breweries love them. I find that they're like really broadening our customer base. So where probably a lot of other breweries would do like a blonde or something like that. For us, like we make a pina colada slushy, and that's almost like our version of a blonde ale. It's really approachable, really tasty, easy to drink, and everybody likes it.
Nice. Any other questions for Bebo and Chris? If not, we've sucked up almost an hour and a half of nothing but Q&A, which is not a bad thing. Don't get me wrong, right? Because like it was really interesting, and you guys were really accommodating with allowing us to ask the questions and being very forthcoming with what's going on at the brewery, right? And I think all of us on the call, as well as the fan base out there, are looking forward to the tap room opening, right? Now that we've heard, like, I mean, this is that's gonna be exciting, I think.
Yeah, it's gonna be different, but it'll be good.
Right. So I'm gonna stop the recording, but I'm gonna say thanks to both yourself, Steve, and Chris, for being so open and approachable and presenting the items on the pastry stout and that style, and to allow us to just like talk your ear off about beer.
Thank you. This is awesome. I really appreciate it.
Okay, cheers, guys.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Guys, that was great.